This past October, Stacey Hasegawa had high hopes for her pumpkin patch planted at Kohala Ranch on Kohala Mountain.
Yes, lots of them. We should have a ton, more than we've ever had before.
Pumpkin growing has never been easy in Hawaii. One of the main reasons why, come fall, this is the only pumpkin patch on the island.
I officially quit last October. I ran out of pumpkins. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore.
But this year, Hasegawa was going to get it right.
And so I have now a full-time farm manager.
And produce the biggest pumpkin yield to date.
With their help, they made it happen to where it's at now.
She even put up a corn maze to complement the Kohala attraction.
I thought it would be a good activity for the kids here, and also to get kids to think creatively about ways that agriculture can play a role in their lives.
But now, months later, Hasegawa finds herself explaining what went wrong.
Here I am with my corn maze and my pumpkin patch, and everything's beautiful, and I go up there on September 5th and I go up for a blessing, and I have almost 150, 200 people up there for this blessing of our corn maze. And it was the first time I physically hadn't been in my fields doing the pumpkin cultivation. And my plants were, I kid you not, this deep. The flowers were sticking out. You could see them from the highway. It was like the most amazing crop of pumpkin plants I'd ever had. And as I'm walking through this with all these people and hosting this event, I'm looking around and I'm noticing in September, there's no fruit. Where are my pumpkins? And I'd ask my farmer, how are the pumpkins? And he'd say, they're looking great, they're growing, everything's great, we're good, we're on target. And I just had this sick feeling that day that, oh my gosh, something is not right.
Speaking before a large audience at Waimea's Hawaii Preparatory Academy, Hasegawa recounted the story of her massive crop failure.
2 days later, and put on my boots, my long sleeve shirt, and trudged 4 acres of pumpkins, literally going like this. Digging and digging and digging and digging and cussing and swearing and crying and kicking, going, oh my God, there's no pumpkins.
How could this happen?
I had the flowers. I had everything I could possibly humanly do to finally succeed at what I've been envisioning for all these years was not coming true, and it was beyond my control.
All signs point to one thing.
And even though I had a beehive and I thought I had it dialed, I learned quickly that that beehive wasn't sufficient. And not only that, what was amazing is that even around my beehive, my plants weren't pollinated. I didn't sleep for about 5 days, freaked out, and finally at 3 in the morning, I emailed Alex Sue from Maloon Farms and told him, because I had the corn maze and everything, 1,600 kids scheduled for school tours. I couldn't cancel, I had to move forward, and Alex Sue, with a $10,000 deposit, fronted me $27,000 in pumpkins. 2 40-foot containers, a 10-foot container, and because he knew who I am and believed in me, he said, I'll give you this, but I can't give it to you for free, just get me the money, and I did. Then it was on top of it the shipping, and I freaked out about that $7,000 more. So on a Saturday afternoon, thank God for Google, I started Googling and found the vice president of Young Brothers office line, left him a message, kept moving through the Young Brothers chain of command, and finally he emailed me back on Monday morning saying, I got your message, we're gonna help you. And Young Brothers granted me and sponsored and donated all the shipping. And Kohala Ranch and I think it was Kohala Topsoil, everybody just pulled together because they saw the value of what we were doing for our island and donated and worked, and we got it there. And we hand pollinated. We ended up having to hand pollinate, but the whole thing is that the show must go on. And with agriculture, for those of you who work in the industry, farming is a risk. It's a scary venture. And you never know, just when you think you have it in the bag, you lose your crop. And so you have orders to fulfill, and you got to call somebody else in to help you, and that's what we did.
Public concern attracted a big crowd out to HPA's Be the Change event held Friday evening at the Gates Performing Arts Center.
It is her story that really motivated us to put on this event.
This is really scary because my bees disappeared in a year. Obviously, they were declining the year before, but they just disappeared. So with that is why this whole event was created.
The event was put together with Bee Love Apiaries, the Kohala Center, Kohala Mountain Farm, and Slow Food Hawaii. Stacey's story has rekindled local interest in a problem of worldwide concern. Bee colonies around the planet are weakening and dwindling, and unhealthy bees mean crops are not getting pollinated like they used to be, and that affects the amount of food that is grown.
1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat is pollinated by a bee.
The cause for the collapsing colonies is unclear, although scientists believe climate change, pesticides, habitat loss, and parasites may be to blame. Here in Hawaii, the recent 1-2 punch of varroa mite and the small hive beetle has done drastic damage to island hives. We have long known of the possible consequences of a diminished bee population on the island. Stacey's story was one of the first crop failure stories to be told.
But I just had always heard about the bee issue as being on the mainland. And hear bits and pieces of news here and there in Hawaii about the bee situation, but I didn't really associate it with me because it's kind of like that not in my backyard syndrome.
We're hearing reports now in the Kohala areas and in some areas in Hilo is that there's not enough bees to help pollinate our crops. Whether or not this will be down like this, where you won't see a lot of bees on your crops, will be heavily dependent upon beekeepers now. So how do the beekeepers help promote bees into our environment?
Scott Nikaido and the staff of the University of Hawaii Manoa Honey Bee Project concur that bad bees were likely to blame for Stacey's pumpkin failure. But they also say it's not the only agricultural bust.
On Oahu, we had one case where a farmer actually who was a melon farmer, actually took out all his crop because he didn't have any bees to pollinate his melon crop, and he planted taro, because taro you don't need bees. Besides the Kohala pumpkin patch here, our lab has gotten calls from a farmer who does gourd ipu production in Kauai, and didn't have enough bees to grow that melon, because the ipu is actually a big melon that requires bees. So it's not only pumpkins, it's melons and a lot of other fruits and nuts that require bees. And more you're going to probably start hearing reports that we don't have enough bees to help pollinate our crop. And it's not only farmers, you're going to hear backyard growers, like your person who just has a couple of trees that are trying to grow, let's say lychee, that may start having difficulty because of the lack of bees.
I guess our researchers will be going around the island.
We first met with Nikaido 3 years ago in Puna, when news of the invasive bee pests first hit the island.
We'll be going to a feral hive. We'll be tagging it with a GPS and marking the tree. And we'll be going back and collecting about 50 bees for sample.
I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, we were taking a look at the hives, and these are nice, massive, wild colonies.
Is it inside?
Yeah, it goes underneath the chin.
Oh, it's perfect.
That's amazing, eh?
That's so funny.
Which, could be a good 5-6 feet in length and just hanging and thriving as a bee colony.
Just like humans, they like sugar. A lot of times the feral hives are a little bit more aggressive, so we'll see how they act. They may come after your face or your hands if you aren't protected. That's why we ask the public just to locate it and just contact us to go examine these bees. Yeah. Okay, you ready?
The UH team guided us around the neighborhoods of Kehena, collecting bees from feral hives in order to run tests.
As far as our virus testing data, what we're pretty much going to do is that feral hive that we examined, we're going to compare those with our managed colonies and see how many more, how much if viruses are being transmitted into the hive. We can see the differences in feral hives versus hives that are managed as far as virus loads, and see how that affects the colony. Looks like it's like a Black & Decker.
Really? Wow.
They weren't aggressive at all. They didn't mind it. It's very
Kind of like wreck their bottom of their comb.
Yeah, you got some a little bit here, Scott.
Even though beekeepers who are going to manage their hives properly with varroa, the varroa that are in the feral hives are going to be your so-called breeding hives for varroa, because they're not going to be managed properly. So those are the ones that are going to have viruses, and those are the ones that are going to be transmitted to your colonies.
Nikaido shared some sobering thoughts about those bees and others like them.
Well, because of these pests, they're probably all gone right now. And I believe one of the hives that we took a look at is now dead just because of the mite. And it probably died a few years ago. And this is probably happening to a lot of our wild bee populations because there's no one to manage those colonies for pests.
For Stacey and the event organizers, the event was all about building awareness.
And so if we're on an island and we're living this, we all have to come together and raise awareness about what's going on with our bees and support beekeepers and figure out ways. And I don't have the solution, but we need to figure out what's next for our island.
There was a movie, Queen of the Sun, shown in the theater, followed by a Q&A with panelists and a chance to taste honey.
So I'm passing this jar around, and if you guys could just take one little one, if you pass it around.
With guidance for the palate provided by the local superstars of beekeeping who've learned to manage the invasive honeybee pests while producing award-winning artisan honey.
Single flower honey. Honey that comes from one type of flower, not a mixture of all kinds of flowers put together. And that's when you can start to distinguish pretty amazing tastes and qualities of those honeys.
Yep, exactly right. And also with this honey, does anyone have an idea of what it is? I'll take 2 guesses. Nobody.
Red clover.
It's not red clover. We don't really have lots of red. It's not kiave. It is Christmas berry. It's a ka'u blend. And you can tell because it has kind of a strong flavor at first and it kind of sticks on your tongue. It's more, as I would call, a darker, richer honey.
This is Big Island Video News for Tuesday, January 29th, 2013. I'm Stephanie Salazar.
You guys could read it, but I prefer you just to kind of taste it without looking at it and read it.